My name is Myra Paperny, and my first memory of involvement was all the Jewish families in all the small towns in central Alberta used to meet once a month. The men would be raising money together, and the women would be having meetings together.
My name is Faith Reback. My first memories are with my parents. They were very involved in the community. My father, we would have dinner, and my father would get up and leave for meetings. And my mother was very active in several organizations, and I remember her also, but meeting during the day so she could be at home to prepare our dinner.
I'm Jenny Belsberg. My first memories of tzedakah and raising money for the community were my parents, my father especially, who would go around with all the artists in the community to raise money. Also, my parents would feed the poor, who at the time it was the dirty 30s, and people were traveling across the country, and my parents would have them into our home and feed them.
Do you remember when the first kids came over after the war? I remember that in Vancouver. It was very interesting trying to integrate them into the community.
That's right. They were looking for homes here to take in displaced children. So my mother and father sat down with my sister and myself, and we agreed that we would take in a boy because there was no boy in the house. And we got news through Mrs. Perlman that this boy had a sister, an older sister. So we took them both in. And that in itself was something that there's no way that could be replaced, that experience of having them live in our homes.
Later, when I wrote about this, I went back to interview many of these people who had been children at that time. Some people were very willing to talk about that period in their lives, and some could not talk about their first time in Calgary or Vancouver. But I think it was very, very important to one's future involvement was seeing what had happened and how these survivors were when they arrived, no question.
We didn't have a Jewish community center, and I remember Harry Schatz saying, we've got to do something about this. And we started fighting for a new Jewish community center. And we built our case, and we took it to the senior men in the community who we thought might give money, and they shot us down. They said, what for? This was only the initiation of all of the ideas. And then it finally happened. Somebody like Myra's husband got very involved in that.
And they had bought this property several years in advance.
Right, and our husbands invested with that in the property also at the time. And we all believed in it. We believed it was important. And we have a Jewish center that now needs revitalizing, which is the wonderful thing.
My father had the foresight of having a camp in this part of the country.
That's right.
Then became Camp BB, and is now Camp Baby Reback. Because if they wanted to go to camp, the only one that was close and would be Hatika.
I heard of a case of an elderly woman who her husband had Alzheimer's, and he was spending her money, and he was acting very strangely, and she couldn't get any help from anybody in the community. And she met a Jewish woman in her apartment building who said, why don't you go to the Jewish Family Service? And she said, well, I'm not Jewish. And she said, that won't matter. So she went, and they helped her. They moved her out of her apartment. They gave her help, and they put her where she needed to be. That's what we do. That's called tzedakah.
That's tzedakah.
And those are the things that we do. It doesn't matter. It's not just for Jewish people.
Don't you think one of the most important things that we did, though, was in founding a women's division? That was in 1964, I believe.
Because it was Clarice who came with that idea to start this kind of thing. And it was through the National Council of Jewish Women that this first happened. Clarice was a very strong member of council,
yes.
And she felt that it was important that we have a united fund, and that we do it separately as women, calling together all the organizations and individuals that she knew were interested, and got us started forming the first women's division of UJA.
Well, and prior to that, it was Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so gave the money.
Right.
And the women were not giving separately.
I remember the first few phone calls, the shock and the question, well, we give as a family and it's under my husband's name. But I think this was one of the most important and momentous occasions of all, that we became involved separately as
I
women
agree.
and giving ourselves.
And we encouraged them to give out of their grocery money
Right.
or any savings that they had.
I recall when we started out, it was just $25 at that first meeting. And even then, people said they couldn't afford to do that. They weren't going to give $25 out of what they were giving already. And it's not an easy job to do that.
I remember a woman, to me then, elderly woman, I canvassed for a certain amount, and she listened to what I had to say, and she said, I really want to do that. I want to give. And she said, but to do that, I will not buy myself. I won't be able to buy myself a winter coat. And she did contribute that amount of money that the coat would cost. But it was hard for the men too, in a way, because they weren't used to this.
No, and all of a sudden a woman was becoming independent. All of a sudden
Yes.
she wants money to give her on her own.
That's
you know,
right.
This was not the way it was.
But we slowly did it, and we very successfully accomplished it.
But we were involved before anyway. For example, whenever there was a Top Gifts UJA dinner, the people who had to organize, say at the hotel, were the women. Who organized the dinner there were the women.
Yeah.
Who organized in homes when you had smaller meetings were the women. So it played a part for a very long time before. And this was, this was an additional thing. And of course, I think one of the greatest things was to see your daughters become involved too. And your children
Absolutely.
generally, that they followed, and as they moved to other communities or things in the city, that they became involved. And if they went away to school, they showed their involvement there too, with fundraising and everything.
That's true.
Very important.
That is true. You never know where life is going to take you. You know, and often you feel a need because there's nobody else to do it. So you end up doing the job because it has to be done. I remember starting the Lion of Judah at Martha Cohen's home, and there were just 4 of us, the 3 of us and Martha.
That's correct. Yes. Yeah.
And we thought, how are we going to do this? How are we going to get people to give more money to become a Lion of Judah? We asked people to join us. We said we were doing this, and the reasons why we had done it. We felt that there had to be a higher level of giving, and it wasn't possible for everybody, but we could, and we thought that some of these people we felt could join us. So from 4, we've grown, I think, into the 70s, or I forget what the numbers are now, but it's amazing what has happened. And, you know, it is a small community, so I think we're doing very well. So there are lots of things that build a community. It isn't just one thing. And you know, some of the leaders are working in other areas, not necessarily in UJA, but hopefully they're supporting UJA because it is the main fund. And I think this is something that gets lost, is to realize that this is our community fund. It is our United Fund.
True.
And you know, we talk about the United Way in Calgary, but this is the Jewish United Way. And everybody has to get involved in it.
I think it's very important. If you've seen statistics about young people's involvement in the Jewish communities, that it has dropped to a certain extent today. And I think it's very important that we remind our children, our grandchildren, and anybody else's children that their involvement in the community and this level is more important now than ever. Not necessarily how much they give, but they care and give of themselves, above all, involvement within the community.
But many people come to our community. This is a community where people drift in and out. You know, they come for their jobs, then they leave. They don't make a commitment, but they expect all the facilities to be there here, not just in the Jewish community and the non-Jewish community. They come here expecting everything to be just perfect, like it was back home. Who's going to build it if they don't get involved? We've done our bit. We can't keep on doing it. We can support them, but it's up to them. If they want to have these things, they want to have it for their future, for their children, they have to get involved.
But I see that happening with the UJA. I see the younger women getting very involved with a broader scope, with a broader vision.
And we hope that is the case.
And I hope that continues and opens up even more.
Right.
I'm sure that the upcoming generations of leadership with UJA will see.
I have great hope. I see a lot of sparks in the community.
We're the beneficiaries of what we have done and what we'll continue to do.
I think also I'd like to say that being involved is very healthy. There are statistics proving that women who are involved in the community live longer and are healthier. I'm one of them. and I think it's very important. How many homes can you have? How many cars can you drive? How many rings can you wear on your fingers? How many things can you do that mean something to you? And I'm not saying you shouldn't have them, but when you do things for others and you work for the community and you help others, you enrich your life in a much more meaningful way, and you make wonderful friends who probably have the same things in common. And I recommend it. It's the way to go.